Talofa lava, malole soifua, maua malelangi e mama. Manuel Evayaso Olengangana Samoa. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And yeah, you've asked me to talk a little bit about myself. So, I think, where else to start but with my family. So my dad's from Fiji and my mum's from Samoa. I'm one of 5 siblings, and I am married to Solomon-Tanoa'I, and we have 2 children, 2 daughters, and we live in Wellington. And we've been based in Wellington for about 15 years now, but traveling overseas and living overseas for, I guess we've been overseas for about 10 years. So we've been back in New Zealand for the last, just 2 weeks before lockdown, we moved back to Wellington. And it's been just amazing to be back home and to be closer to family. And I think there seems to be, we seem to be having a moment here in New Zealand in terms of working towards systemic change and a more equitable society. And I'm just really pleased to be back here and part of it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Tupe. Man, I've seen some of your interviews and I just can't get over how very talented you are. So just tell us
Thank you.
What it is that you do, what you're involved in, some of the work that you've done overseas.
While I was at high school, I really developed a passion for languages, and actually that started much earlier from my childhood, because my Nana, who I'm named after, she was fluent in 4 languages, and although she couldn't read or write, so she spoke a lot of languages, and we heard them growing up, but we weren't expected to reply. So I was always fascinated by learning different languages. And at school, my favorite subjects were French and Japanese. When I went to university, I went there with the specific intention of joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. That was my dream job. And after graduating, that's the job that I landed. My family and I mentioned we've lived around the world, and we had an amazing time representing New Zealand overseas. And I guess the thing is, once I had sort of set my mind on becoming a diplomat, that was sort of the only thing that I really thought about. And I forgot about certain dreams that I had when I was younger. I had always loved singing. I had, always been, I guess, one of the leaders of the Samoan group at primary school, and
yes.
Sang in church and sang in gospel groups and things like that. I had always loved creative writing. But all of those things I sort of pushed to the side because I wanted to focus on my main goal of becoming a diplomat. And then as I became a mother, I also really wanted to just focus on family for that season. I'm still, my kids are now 11 and 14, so, still very much need their mum and dad, but in a different way. And so about 2 or 3 years ago, I sort of started having a bit more headspace to think about my creative side. And also I was facing some challenges in the workforce and things that I needed to process and think about. So I turned to my creative side and started writing. I wrote a web series, and just the process of writing, I would stay up till, really late at night, 2 or 3 in the morning, because the characters would, they just took on a life of their own. And I guess through the, my professional life, I had learned a lot of skills. I learned a lot of event management skills, and had met a lot of amazing people who were artists and got the chance to, you know, pick their brain about, you know, their creative process and things like that. And so that's how our web series Misadventures of a Pacific Professional was born. And yeah, just from there, there was also really a great thing for us as a family too, because I mentioned before when I introduced myself, you know, I come from a family of 5 siblings, and my mum and dad and like the family that raised me have been incredibly supportive of my journey. And then my husband, Sarah, has been a stay-at-home dad for 13 years. And that really, you know, enabled me to focus on my career. But, you know, Sarah also needed a chance to develop his skills and his passion. And so, you know, once we did the web series together, so I wrote it and Sarah produced it. Well, we co-produced it, and but it was, I think that was one of the most rewarding things about doing the web series, was seeing my husband come into his own and to see him have the chance to shine, because when he was studying, he had always wanted to get into film. And so, and that was a really good entry point. And so he's worked on other projects since then. And then when we moved back to New Zealand, we decided to do Tupe to highlight successful Pasifika people and the amazing work that they're doing. So, yeah, I guess there's a lot of irons in the fire, but we're just at that stage where, you know, I guess I've realized myself that, you know, we are multifaceted beings and we don't have to pick just one box. You know, God gave us a lot of talents, and he gave us those talents for a reason, and, you know, he wants us to use them.
Oh, that is so awesome, Tupe. I love that, because I also really believe that Pacific people are very talented, and it's just it's sad when the creativity is not utilized or used. So that's really encouraging. I love that. Tell us, with your diplomatic work, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What do you do as a diplomat, and did you do some of that overseas?
So the great thing about a career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade is that it's so varied. So it's a rotational system. So you basically change jobs every 3 years. And there are different divisions that deal with different parts of New Zealand's foreign policy. So there are regional divisions that look after New Zealand's relationship with a particular region. So, for example, North Asia, Southeast Asia, European division, Americas division. For the Pacific, there are multiple different divisions, actually, because it's one of our most important relationships. And then, of course, Australia division. And then there are different parts of the ministry that deal with our multilateral engagements. So different parts of the ministry look after our relationship with the UN, or there's a whole division devoted to trade. So those are the people who go and negotiate our trade agreements, or who represent New Zealand at the WTO, or at APEC, which New Zealand is hosting at the moment. So yeah, you do get the opportunity to do something new every 3 years or so, and so it's a very exciting job. It means you have to constantly learn new things, and you sort of alternate between you know, doing some time in Wellington and then doing some time overseas. So when I started at the ministry, I worked in the trade division, and I worked on trade agreements like our free trade agreement with China, and I also got to go to Geneva to the WTO to represent New Zealand's position on certain negotiations, and then my first posting was a secondment to the New Zealand Commerce and Industry Office in Tupe, and I did long-term language training there. So I learned, so my full-time job for the first 2 years was to learn Chinese, and it was really intense. But you need to do that because part of my job when I started working in the office was to, I needed to operate in a Chinese speaking environment. So we went to Taiwan twice, and it was a really amazing opportunity for my family. Actually, I'll show you this manga here, which a good friend of mine drew, and that was our family when we were living in Taiwan.
Wow, that is really pretty. I was going to ask you about that too, because it's quite unique.
So it's actually all of these, all of the art behind me is done by my good friend Mikhail Mulipula. Yeah, so he is also a wrestler who goes by the name of Bloody Samoan.
I think I've seen him on the social media. That's awesome. That's I love that. So is that learning your 4 languages? What 4 languages do you speak, Tupe?
Oh, so French I did all throughout high school, and I also did, so French I did all throughout high school. Then I did a year in France, and then French was my major at uni. And then Japanese I did at high school and university, but I wouldn't say that I'm fluent. But when I go to Japan, I can, sort of order my food and tell the taxi driver where to go, that kind of thing. So Chinese, I have speak Chinese to a professional level because of my training. And then Samoan and Fijian I'm learning.
Oh, wow. Growing up Fiji and Samoan, Tupe, tell us what that was like.
Well, it was really interesting because we identified really strongly as both Fijian and Samoan. My dad is, so he's, I guess, ethnically Samoan, but Fijian by nationality. So his grandparents, so my great-grandparents went to Fiji in the late 1800s. They were part of a small group of Matai who were appointed by the Ifakasa Church to, the London Missionary Society to start the church in Fiji. And so they went there. There's quite a history of Samoans migrating to Fiji. That's where a lot of Samoans went before New Zealand was an option. And so my family has been since my great-grandparents moved over there, are still branches of my family who are still in Fiji, and my Fijian cousins came to live with us when we were young. We had a very strong sense of our Fijian side as well as our Samoan side, and because I grew up in South Auckland, and the majority, I felt like I was in the majority there in South Auckland. So, all of the people I went to, school with, identified strongly with their Pasifika cultures. And it's quite different here in Wellington. I noticed that, my girls have had different experiences going to school around the world, but even their experience here in New Zealand is quite different to what I had at primary school. When I went to high school, I went from being, in the majority in South Auckland to then being, one of a handful of Pasifika girls. And my parents, did that because they wanted to give me, it was a very prestigious school that they sent me to, and they wanted to give me the best opportunity. And I was thankful that I did have that, I guess, culture shock from a young age, because it prepared me for what the rest of my life was like.
Yeah.
Just being in the minority, and I guess having to find my own identity in, just finding that grounding within myself.
A lot of what I'm finding with the girls when we have the interviews is that, aside from all the glitz and the glams of, where they are now and where they came from, there's always those moments where, that's not so flash, or that's not so, those trials, the tribulation times. Can you just share a couple of those and how you overcame them, whether it was being in a foreign country or during your time in school being, the one out of the minority, or representing New Zealand and Taiwan or something like that? Can you share some of those, I guess, real life journeys?
I feel like the younger generation coming through, I feel like they have benefited a lot from some of the lessons that we've learned. So in my generation, a big thing was just learning how to advocate for yourself and to use your voice. And for me, it took, almost 40 years to find my voice. And I'm, really happy to see this really confident younger generation coming through. But one of the things that I guess, I talk to my kids about is just about thinking about where and how you can have the most impact. So, for example, I, have been in situations where, someone has said something very triggering to me. In fact, numerous times throughout my career have, heard something, in a meeting or in a social situation, where, your feelings get triggered because, the other person is talking about something from an intellectual point of view, without really understanding, without having the lived experience that we have. And there may be, I guess, a number of reasons why I, haven't, or why a person might not want to speak up at that particular point in time. So for example, I guess, one example I can pick off the top of my head is that I was an invited guest, to a workplace. Somebody said something very triggering. And because I hadn't met everyone else in the room, they actually didn't know me at all, and I needed, professional relationships going forward. I was like, okay, I'm not going to take this person to task right this very second.
Yeah.
But I had to think through, well, first of all, during that meeting, I had to keep myself calm, which is, a burden that we carry, So I had to keep myself calm in that moment. But then, I followed up in a way, where I could, be sure that, it was safe for me to do so. And, just sort of, approach the person kind of in charge and said, look, I actually don't think that covered the full story, but, I would be very pleased to come back, to this group and, talk about some of the wider, systemic issues. And so that's, kind of, one of the things I think that a lot of Pacific professionals have to deal with, and that's what I covered in Misadventures of a Pacific Professional, is like all of the stuff that's going on inside when we, are presented with different challenges, and if we choose not to speak, in a particular moment, that doesn't mean the moment is gone. You know, you know, can still, yeah. I guess the thing for me is, you know, what I talk to my kids about is, you know, just try and think how you're going to have the most impact. You know, if you think having it, you know, it all out and just, you know, laying it all out on the table right there and then is the way that you're going to have impact, then, you know, do that. But if you think, you know, hang on, there might be another way for me to approach this, and to take control of the situation, you know, or get my message across in an environment where I am in control of the situation, then, you know, you can do that too.
You know, and just in saying that, because you've represented New Zealand, you know, around 7 places around the world, you must come across a lot of that, you know, a lot of, I mean, I'll just call it as it is, like either probably racism or, of course, one minority being Pacific Island female. You know, how you've just explained how you deal with it, but what are some of the other things that you do? Like, how do you, oh man, how do you offload? How do you, you know, who are your mentors? Who do you go to? And some more advice.
Okay, I'm going to answer the second part of your question, but I think just to your first comment about being, you know, experiencing some of these things overseas, you know, I think the interesting thing is that on the international stage, I probably experience less bias than back here in New Zealand, because on the international stage, you know, people don't have preconceived ideas of where a Pacific woman should be, and also because yeah, like, you know, in an international organization, you know, this is, you know, like island where everyone is wearing their own national dress at the UN, you know,
right.
And you know, every country, no matter how small, has its own seat. So, you know, in the UN, the, you know, Samoa's vote is just as important as, you know, the US vote. So, yeah, I just, you know, kind of, you know, find that aspect interesting, that, you know, these preconceived notions of, you know, what Pacific people are capable of, like the negative connotations, like we face that more here than I have overseas. Yeah, which is, you know, a bit of a pity, but, you know, I think, as I mentioned in my introduction, I do feel like there is more of an awareness now of things like unconscious bias, of systemic racism, and you know, we're talking about it now, which is a really positive development.
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
So, yeah,
Sorry,
but I think it is, yeah, important. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say that it is important to yeah, have mentors and people that you can, you know, a safe space where you can discuss certain things, and that's definitely where I found my solace is, you know, when I was experiencing certain things in the workforce. Yeah, so when I would, you know, be mistaken for, you know, basically anyone other than, you know, someone who's meant to be there for that job.
Yeah.
You know, I would talk to, you know, my friends from, you know, high school and from university who were also in high places in their respective fields. And, you know, I discovered I wasn't alone. And, you know, since sharing the web series, you know, I've met so many Pacific women and men who have said, yep, that is my story too. And yeah, I think talking about it definitely helps, because it helps with those feelings of isolation that you can feel. But I also think that, you know, having your Pasifika groups in your workplace is really important. And, you know, there's power in numbers, and I feel like the purpose of those groups, you know, one of the goals, could be just to share experiences, but, the other goal could be, meeting with your CE every quarter to say, look, these are the issues we're facing and this is how we think the organisation can help.
Thanks for that, Tupe. Yeah, I remember when I was in Taiwan, and man, they just love seeing people of different ethnicity. They love that. They love the cultural items. They love, just seeing a different face, to what they're used to seeing every day. And then you come home and it's not the same. But yeah, totally understand that one. Tupe, I'm really interested, what type of character or what sort of characteristics do you need to have to be a diplomat?
It's been a while since I joined, so there may well have been an update to what they're looking for, but so for MFAT they recruit across any discipline basically. So when I joined, I was told that a conjoint degree, law, and something else so I did a conjoint law and arts. I heard that would be particularly useful, and lots of people who joined had that background, but there's no specific degree that you need. So we had people in my cohort who had previously been dentists or doctors or who had history degrees and or science degrees, so basically any discipline, they're looking for things like a strong sense of New Zealand identity. I think other languages are an advantage, particularly Pacific languages. So it's a competitive process, but I strongly encourage Pacific people who are thinking of a career in diplomacy to give it a go.
And so you did that straight after uni?
Yeah.
Wow. Is it straight after college? Tupe?
So I had spent 5 years at university doing my conjoint and then joined as a graduate.
Wow, that's awesome. Hey, one thing I noticed, because it's Samoan Language Week, you've got one of those.
Tualima.
Yes. Can you please take us through what it is and what you have decided to, because all the patterns are unique to your own. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Week. Can you give us a rundown on that? Because I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a tualima, which is a tattoo on the back of the hand. And in old days, this was a navigation tool. So at the tips of my fingers are ngongo, which are birds to guide my way. Sorry, my just to say why this is a little bit unclosed, because I think my mirror, the camera is mirrored, so it's moving in an opposite direction. And so down here are earthworms to keep me grounded. So over here there are 5 ngongo, so 5 birds representing me and my siblings. These 2 diamonds here represent both sides of my family, and these whetū, these stars, represent my ancestors. Let's see, can you see this? Here we have a symbol for jellyfish, which is a symbol of femininity, and we have 2 here for my daughters. Sorry, my finger's not moving the way. Okay, 2 here for my daughters, 1 bird down here for our whāngai, who is Sarah's youngest brother, who we raised till he was 12. And then these 2 ngongo facing each other are me and my husband. Wow.
Did it hurt?
Do you know what? It actually didn't. Yeah. Oh, so the artist who did this was Tyler Vial. So she's one of the only females to be given the blessing to do this, Tualima.
Where's she
Um,
based?
so she's based in Auckland, but she came down to Wellington to do this. Well, she was in Wellington for a couple of days doing tattooing, so I booked my slot early. So I wanted to get this done for my 40th birthday. Like I've always wanted to have a tattoo, but the timing, I guess, wasn't right. And yeah, so I really wanted to get something to commemorate my 40th. And yeah, and I'm glad I waited, because if I'd gotten one when I was younger, I think I would have got one in a place that was less visible. But because now, you know, I guess earlier I would have thought, oh, it might affect my career, I'm not sure. And now that, you know, I've kind of, you know, achieved a few things that I wanted to professionally, and I've really come into my own in terms of my cultural identity. And so, like, I'm just so proud to wear this in a visible place, and it's a real conversation starter, I think. And yeah, it's a, you know, chance for me to represent my culture.
I love it, and you are so right. It is a conversation starter, because you keep waving your hand. I'm like, I need to ask her about it. Tupe, how is Talano with Tupe going? What are some of the highs and the lows of that? Really interested. I mean, I love it. I haven't seen everything, but when I do get a chance, I watch the interviews. And what sort of initiated that? Was there something that got you thought, oh, I could be good at that? So what were the niches that got that up and running?
So because I've spent quite a bit of my career in policy, one of the things that I noticed was that there's quite a lot of emphasis on the negative statistics for the Pasifika community, and the reason why that's necessary is so that the government knows where to divert focus its attention and its resources. But the flip side of that is that sometimes it can contribute to a dominant narrative about our people, which is negative. And you need to, you know, balance that out with, you know, shows like Pasifika Women of Influence and, you know, other shows that give attention to the amazing things that our people can do. So at the time, it was just just during or like just after lockdown that I was aware that there's a new TV station, Oriana TV, starting up in Wellington, and the general manager of the station got in contact with us to talk about misadventures and showing misadventures of a Pacific professional on the station. And we got talking about, you know, we said, look, we've got some other ideas that we'd like to pitch. And yeah, he loved the idea of the chat show and commissioned it. And yeah, I had like all of, you know, sort of said to him, look, you know, there's all of these people I'd love to interview. And it was quite interesting because, you know, we weren't sure, you know, if everyone would be available. And also because, you know, this is, you know, we didn't receive any funding for the show. It was a co-production between us and Oriana TV. And so all self-funded. We had to do it, you know, shoot it in such a way that was going to be most economical for us. So we had no idea if, you know, all of the people we wanted to interview would be available. But everything just fell into place really beautifully. And I think, yeah, in a way that kind of, yeah, for us, we just really felt that our show, you know, like God's hand was on that project, and that's why it came together.
And so did you you do that with your husband? That's a conjoint project.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so we did the first season last year, and we're starting to film the second season now.
Do the girls get involved a bit, Tupe?
Yeah, it's a real family affair. So both of my girls have a role. So the younger one helps me with my wardrobe, and she also helps out with the catering. And the older one does behind the scenes footage, and she also does teleprompter and things like that. So it's a real learning experience for them.
Yeah, it's so good though, because it's outside of school as well. They get to get that hands-on sort of thing going. Tupe, I want to know, who were your inspirations growing up?
Oh, well, I can't go past my mum and dad. They were amazing role models growing up, for me growing up, and for my brothers and sisters. So they were very entrepreneurial. Also, like, my mum was a stay-at-home mum for many years. So she actually left school when she was 14, and that wasn't unusual at that time, like in the 60s. She left school at 14 to work full-time to support, help her family put food on the table. And then she married my dad when she was 18. They had 5 kids, and my mum stayed at home until my youngest brother was 5. And on the back of like having left school at 14, she started several businesses together with my dad. A movie cinema, a travel agent, and then they started a school called a private training establishment, and it was so they ran that school for 25 years, and it was basically a school for second chance education. So these days people go to polytechs, and even universities have bridging courses and things like that. So if you didn't get your NCEA, but back when my parents started their school about 30 years ago, there was nothing like that. So they were really filling a gap, and they were pioneers in that sector. And so they really emphasised the value of education for us kids. And that's why they, bent over backwards to send me to a flash school. They really believed that education was your passport to the future. So I guess I really admire my mum, because she and others in her generation fought really hard for opportunities that we take for granted. So like, I just took it for granted that, I would go to high school and finish high school, that I would go on to university, and that I would go on to have a career. And all of those things were really hard fought wins by women of my mum's generation.
That's really amazing. Do you find that with your kids, similar patterns? So I find that with my kids, taking a lot for granted. Back in our days, we didn't have lunch money. It was whatever was in the cupboard, that was your lunch. And but I hear what you're saying. We did take it for granted, knowing that our parents couldn't finish high school, had to give it up to look after Nana or family members. Same pattern with the kids now.
Yeah.
Very different generation.
And it's good, like as I was saying before, it took me almost 40 years to find my voice. But, my kids at 11 and 14, they already know that what they have to say is important, and that someone should listen to them. That honestly took me years. So I'm really glad that they've been able to benefit from, like my struggle. But at the same time, it's like, okay, cool, but there's other things you've got to, you've got to pick your moment. Like, when is the best time to use your voice?
Yeah. Can you just, sorry, I'm being really picky here, Tupe, but can you give an example of when you know it's your time to speak?
I mean, I think, I'm not sure that you ever really, I feel like you'll just like learn those kinds of things from experience, and you'll like the more you practice it, like the more confidence you'll have in your own judgment. And I don't know, I mean, I think because I've come at it from a different experience. So I've come at it from, someone who's taken years and years and years to feel comfortable in exercising, my right to speak up. And so I think it will probably be the opposite for people of my kids' generation. Right? They'll learn from experience of like, speaking up and like, okay, that didn't, have the outcome that I wanted, and so maybe I've got to try something different next time. But I mean, I'm at the stage now where I feel like I've got my own way of advocating for certain things, and quite often my way is to set things up before we actually get into a room. And get people on board and have those side conversations before we have the big discussion. I mean, that's my way of doing things. That suits my personality and my inclinations. But I've come to the point now where I feel really comfortable when I feel like, oh no, it's really important for me to speak up now. This is the moment. I feel I can recognize that now, and I feel that comes with experience.
Tell me, Tupe, while we're on that topic, how many awards have you been given? And can you tell us what some of them are? We're not boasting, guys. I just want to know, because you're such an influential Pacific woman. I want to know some of what were those awards for?
I mean, you're putting me in a difficult position, Victoria.
You don't have to tell us, but I would really like to know one of them. Which one would be, take one out of the how many ever you got, and just tell us why you really received that with such gratitude.
So I think the first thing I would say is that awards are, I guess, the reason why, you kind of, put me in a difficult position is that it feels strange to receive recognition, like individual recognition for something that is a collective effort. But I was very honoured to receive a Women of Influence award last year for diversity and inclusion. Thank you. And when I received the award, I took my whole family with me up on stage, because everything I've done, any success that I've achieved in my life is not the result of my efforts alone. It's the result of generations of sacrifice. So I really wanted to acknowledge my family, the family that raised me, and the family that I'm raising with my husband. But I was, I guess, the thing about, receiving those awards, and I do encourage people to put themselves forward or to nominate someone who's doing great work, is because it, gave me a bigger platform to talk about diversity and inclusion and issues that are important to me. It gave me the opportunity to network with so many amazing women and to learn about the work that they're doing. So, I made sure, so my family So you can, buy tickets as a nominee, but also as a member of the public, you can buy tickets. So, so we bought public tickets as well as, to go to the event, because I knew that just going to the event was an amazing networking opportunity. And so I, met like so many cool people there, and then met up with them afterwards and like, show me, what's your project, and stuff like that. So it's an opportunity to make connections, expand your network, and really, to give profile to the work that you do. So I'd encourage anyone who's thinking about putting themselves forward to do so.
Tupe, I'm almost done. A couple more questions. I want to ask, would you give some advice around, man, you have so much knowledge, so much experience. Give some words of encouragement to my audience if you can, just uplifting them, Pacific women who, what they go through, what we struggle with. What would be your words of encouragement to our viewers out there?
I think, probably the first thing is just, to embrace all of the parts of yourself. It took me a while to figure out that the best parts of myself were the parts of me that were different to everyone else. I spent a long time trying to, fit into the mainstream, but it was only once I embraced my differences that my career really took off. Don't be afraid to be you. And also, don't put yourself in a box. You were given many talents, and we are, multifaceted. So, just go out there and live your best life. And then, probably just to touch again on what I was saying before, just, try and, figure out the best way that you're going to have impact. Whether that's, speaking up in the moment, or, finding another way to express your view. Keep in mind, how to get to the goal that you're wanting to achieve.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tupe, for taking the time out of your evening, especially Samoan Language Week, where everyone's probably crazy busy doing things. You really took the time out to have an interview with me today.